Welcome back to our next edition of the CBB Review Studio podcast. I am Dan Siegel, joined as always by my co-host Ben Anderson, and we are also joined today by our SEC writer here at CBB Review, George Bagwell. George wrote a lot of what we are going to preview today, and that is our continuation of the CBB rank countdown of 100 days until the college basketball season. So we are counting down 100 to one team profile every day. And today on this CBB Review Studio podcast, we are going to preview teams 85 through 81. Let's get started. So we are going to start with, like I said, team number 85, and that is the Georgia Bulldogs, who was set back a little bit by Tom Crean as a program, but Mike White has them back on the come up. What do we think about these Bulldogs? We'll start with you, Ben.
Yeah, I really like the hire actually of Mike White for Georgia. I think he was a better fit than Tom Crean ever was for the program. And while they do lose a ton from last year's roster, including their top three scorers, I think he's building something that is really interesting. And I really like the transfers they pulled in. I like the two guys you put up here. Noah Thomason was just a microwave scorer at Niagara. I think that'll translate well, even if he doesn't put up the same numbers in the SEC. And then Jalen Deloach, that is the type of wing that you want on your team, no matter what. If you are playing at a high level of college basketball, he's athletic, he has good defensive abilities, and I think he has really a lot of potential to be a good player and a good piece for Georgia. But the one person that you don't have up here that I really like to talk about is RJ Sunahara. He's a D2 transfer from Nova Southeastern, put up big numbers there, and I know it's always a difficult transition, but I think that Sunahara can bring a lot to the table as that 6'8" transfer that can play on the wing along with Deloach.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Deloach might just be the best defender in the SEC. I don't think it's a stretch to say that, at least now that Oscar's gone from Kentucky. One player, again, on the roster that I think is a bit underrated, Jabri Abdur-Rahim. If y'all recognize the last name, that is the son of Sharif and the nephew of Amir, who's now at South Florida. Speaking of South Florida, they brought in Russell Chewa, that center, 7 foot, 275. Last year they had Braylon Bridges, 6'10", 225. Chewa's got 50 pounds on him and 2 inches. He should be huge down low. I know Mike White loves a tall center. But back to Abdur-Rahim, the highest three-point percentage on the team last year, highest in PER, first in win shares per 40 minutes. Like, you can debate, like, is that analytic really able to tell how good a player is? But if you're first on a team in anything, really, it should be a pretty good indicator of how good you are.
Yeah, I think the one strength of this Georgia team is definitely going to be depth, something that they have a lot more so this year than last year. And I really like Abdur-Rahim. I feel like George Hughes, actually your make or break player. I feel like he still hasn't reached his full potential. I think he was actually the third leading scorer on Georgia last year, third or fourth, but he really hasn't improved his three-point shot. We know from his Virginia days how he just needs an opportunity and could definitely be one of the better players in a power conference. And yeah, this team has depth. A guy we haven't mentioned yet, RJ Melendez, highly touted guy from Illinois as a transfer. My question is there an alpha guy on this team? Who is the best player on this team that is going to be the guy you need to go to when you need a bucket? Is it Noah Thomason from Niagara? Maybe, but the SEC is a lot higher level of competition than what he's used to playing at Niagara.
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't feel really comfortable asking Noah Thomason to be a number one option here, especially with the transfer up to such a high level of basketball. But I do like a lot of the pieces. I think that no one's going to enjoy playing Georgia this year. And I think that's a good thing for Mike White in his second season.
Yeah, and like I mentioned, they have top 30 ranked classes at high school, top 30 from the portal. Georgia's going in the right direction. A program that I'm not sure the direction they're headed in, though, is our 84th team, and that is the St. Louis Billikens, who I wrote this, and this was actually my article. They are in an interesting crossroads because they are winning enough so that Travis Ford could keep his job, but they're kind of following the trend of the rest of the Atlantic 10. They're not as good as they probably were 10, 12 years ago. And I think this year, if you're looking at St. Louis, their goal has to be the NCAA tournament. They will also, though, need help from the Atlantic 10 in getting there because, like I said on this slide, the Atlantic 10 was a one-bid league for the first time since 2005. So the problem with the Atlantic 10, I feel like, is that a lot of the high major programs, the power conference programs, still view these schools as kind of trap games and they don't want to schedule them. So the Atlantic 10 has weak non-conference schedules, and when they're losing these bye games, it leaves them very little margin for error otherwise, and then they're not putting together a great non-conference resume, a great overall resume. That's why they're ending up with 1 or 2 bids the last couple of years. So they're going to need help from that. But I say all this to say that St. Louis they need a big year. They need something to get them going as a spark on their program. We do project them second in the Atlantic 10, but George, they do lose Yuri Collins and his 10.1 assists per game, which is an A10 single season record. How do you think they replace this?
Yeah, I think it's got to be a team effort here. If you look at the roster now for this year, Collins had more assists per game last year than the entire roster this year combined. And you could slide Mike Meadows into that one spot. That's what they'll likely do. But 2.2 per game from Portland just is not the same beast as 10 for St. Louis. I think Hargrove from the shooting guard spot could take a few of those assists. Tim Dogger, obviously, also a name to watch. But the main key for this offense, I think, is getting Gibson Jimerson the ball, getting him open, and letting him probably save his coaches off the hot seat right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be honest, Dan. I know you're the A10 guy here, but I don't think I like the St. Louis roster all that much. When you look at Jimerson, this was a great stat you pulled. 85% of his points were off of assists. And if that's the case, is this a real 13-point number, right, per game? Or is it just the fact that Yuri Collins had to pass the ball to someone? Undoubtedly, he's a great shooter. But if he doesn't have that facilitator, I don't know how effective he can be doing the one thing he does super well. So I'm a little worried there if that's going to be your best player. They also have slight struggles with size. If you look down the roster, unless Bruce Zhang, which is an unranked freshman, breaks out at 7 foot, they're really not playing anyone over 6'8". So that's another option. I don't think there is a reason to believe that St. Louis will be very good offensively unless Mike Meadows gets back to what he was 2 years ago. And that's what I think the goal is.
Yeah, you basically said everything exactly what I would. So we can move on to our 83rd team. We are now headed into the SEC, or back to the SEC, I should say. And we have LSU, who is now under year 2 under Matt McMahon. I think year 1 progressing to year 2 will be huge for this program because Matt McMahon, he came over from Murray State and he had a rough first season, but honestly, all things considered, it could have been a lot worse. He started his tenure with just 0 scholarship players. George, you talked about this in your article, and he put together something with a few LSU guys he convinced to stay, plus the rest of the roster kind of made up of a few Murray State guys that he brought with him. Things look a lot brighter this year, and it starts with transfers from the mid-major level. Ben, talk to me about Jalen Cook from Tulane.
So Jalen Cook's an interesting case. He actually started his career at LSU before transferring to Tulane, but now he was back in Baton Rouge, and he can score the ball like no one else, it feels like, right? This is an excellent piece to add for Matt McMahon. And when you combine that with Carlos Stewart, you're gonna have a pretty small backcourt. Both of those guys are 6 foot and 6'1" respectively. But you're going to make up for it by bringing in a couple of players that they also had. They had bring back Derek Fountain, which is a good piece to have as a power forward. He's experienced. He knows what his job is on the court. But then you look at guys like Will Baker, transfer from Nevada, 2-time transfer actually, started his career at Texas. he can be a force on the inside. And then my favorite player that they brought in is Yuri Collins, right? We never really saw what he could do at Kentucky. But his athleticism has never been questioned. He's an absolute pogo stick, and I can't wait to see how McMahon is able to use him in this rotation of 7 pretty strong players. I think they're going to be able to score the ball pretty well.
George, do you think that this team, 83, we have them ranked for LSU, do you think that perhaps as a site as a whole, we underranked the Tigers?
I think given the losses towards the end of the bottom of the SEC, if you look at Vanderbilt, you look at other teams in that position, LSU might be the most improved team from last year to this year. Obviously, you can only go up from 2-16 in the conference. But replacing Adam Miller and Cam Hayes with Cook and Stewart is such a huge pickup for McMahon. Getting 2 guards that can shoot and shoot consistently is huge. Will Baker, 13.6 per game from Nevada. Mountain West has gotten so strong that at that point, it's really like a high mid-major. That can translate easily to the SEC. Stewart can score from all over the court. One person I really am interested in is Derek Fountain. Playing second horse to KJ Williams last year. Really, the whole team ran through Williams, but Fountain had sparks where you could see, oh, this kid is going to be probably one of the better options next year for the team. I think 26 points and 4 blocks against Alabama, the number 1 team in the country at the time last year. It's fantastic. And then also freshman Mike Williams. LSU has still not the best guard depth, so getting him in early, if he can shoot, would be fantastic for this Tigers team.
All right, so that's LSU. We stay in the SEC for number 82, and that would be Vanderbilt, who is coming off of an NIT run, which is maybe not what is indicative of the job that Jerry Stackhouse did, as he won SEC Coach of the Year last year, went 11-7 in conference, 22-15 overall. But Vanderbilt still, I know this is a very difficult program to win at, but they still have not made the tournament since year 1 of the Bryce Drew era, actually. In 2017, it was expected to be a big fall this offseason as well, but honestly, it was not too drastic, as first off, they keep Tyrin Lawrence, who scored an efficient 13.1 points per game last year. They also bring in some transfers, including Evan Taylor from Lehigh and the South Dakota kid, Tasos Makateros. I'm not sure what the pronunciation is on that, but both guys who had an efficient double digit. I feel like efficiency is a name of the game for this Vanderbilt team. But George, I'll start with you. What are some of the positives that we see with this Vanderbilt team and the reason why they could, at the very least, replicate the success that they had last season?
For sure. Yeah, getting Lawrence back was the biggest news out of this program for the offseason. He is a special talent. And was kind of overshadowed last year by Liam Robbins. But Lawrence is very capable of being the number 1 option for a good team. And he decided to come back to Nashville. That's great for Jerry Stackhouse and the crew. Let's see, Tasos Makateros, as you mentioned, along with Evan Taylor, 2 big transfers. If Stackhouse doesn't get those 2 in, if he didn't, we're looking at a team that might not scrape the NIT. Then Ezra Manjone, on the team last year, it's fantastic. If you are looking for a guard at the end of the game to get the ball in the hands of the most capable shooter on the team, Ezra can do it. Yeah, you saw last year with the Tennessee game, drives in, kicks it out to Lawrence for 3, Vanderbilt wins, and that kicks off the 5-game winning streak that eventually got them into the NIT. Let's see, in terms of backcourt depth, front court depth, actually, that's going to be tough. We've got Lee Dort penciled in as the starting center, as the only person above 6'9" on the roster. But he averaged 1.5 fouls per game in 6.5 minutes. He's really got to clean that up if he wants extended minutes.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the front court because that's actually where one of my favorite players is coming from. I think the Notre Dame transfer Van Allen Lubin was a really underrated pickup for Jerry Stackhouse. He did really well in his time at Notre Dame as a true freshman, even especially considering how the system works under Mike Ray, where they play very few guys a lot of minutes, and especially in the front court, you really need to stay out of foul trouble. And I thought he did a pretty good job of doing that. So I think he'll bring some solid experience, more so than perhaps other transfers on the roster. Kamateros is in an interesting position because he has some stretchability. He shot 40% from three last season at South Dakota. I think that might end up being your starting five, and you just play an athletic Van Allen Lubin at the five. But we'll see what Jerry Stackhouse thinks of it. Again, like you said, Tyrin Lawrence, biggest win by far of the offseason for Stackhouse.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. I think the potential breakout of Allen Lubin, who had a really promising, I shouldn't say good, but promising freshman season, will be the key for this Vanderbilt team. Let's move on to our final team that we will preview today. That is the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, and they bring in Damon Stoudamire to be their head coach after firing Josh Pastner, who had that ACC championship in that 2021 year compromised by COVID. And they made it to the tournament, then got lost. I think they lost pretty handily to Loyola Chicago. So not much going on in the Josh Pastner era outside of that. And then Stoudamire, I'll admit I was a little bullish about the hire at first, but now they have some promising signs. Of course, they have the highest rated transfer class in the ACC besides the Syracuse Orange, so that helps as well. They also return both of the members of their starting backcourt in Miles Kelly, who averaged 13.4 points per game, and Kyle Sturdivant as well. What do we think is the ceiling on this Georgia Tech team in the first year under Damon Stoudamire?
Yeah, so I really like the backcourt that Stoudamire has put together. Sturdivant is somehow still in college, which is incredible to me. I thought he was gone like 2 years ago, and yet he's still at Georgia Tech. But Miles Kelly is a huge returner for him, for the program. You also have guys like Debo Coleman and Amari Abram, who have both had significant high major experience. And then, like you mentioned before, you bring Kwasi Reeves from Florida. I really like the backcourt here. My question is about the front court, right? Tyjon Claude was really productive at Western Carolina, but you always worry about a big man and what that looks like in a level up. And then you have your neck of the woods, right? Tafari Gapare from UMass. Really promising, highly rated recruit to go to UMass, but then he transfers out. So you find him ending up at Georgia Tech. He has potential, but you never know how that's going to work. I think what they really need is Ebenezer Duwana to step up and be sort of a veteran leader within that front court. He doesn't have to play the most minutes, but I think that would be valuable in terms of getting Georgia Tech perhaps to, I think the top half of the ACC would be a really good goal for this team. Nothing too crazy, probably not an NCAA tournament bid, but just some promising signs of upward movement.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Sturdivant and Abram could definitely split time at the point guard position, maybe the 1A, 1B type of situation. Amari Abram had some great flashes last year. It really a lost season down in Ole Miss with the departure of Kermit Davis. But yeah, that front court is really going to need some help. They got Tafari Gapare, I believe that's how you pronounce it.
Right. Yeah.
Awesome. And then freshman by Dongo, 3-star recruit. This team is going to be really guard heavy. Even the 6-man, 7th-man, 8th-man options, those are going to be in the front court. They got Ebenezer Duwana from NC State, but really more of a project there, just a rim protector. Yeah. He's not going to be able to score the ball or distribute. But overall, I do really like this team. I think it might even be improved from last season of Josh Pastner.
Yeah, I think this is a team I could easily see them finishing like bottom 3 in the ACC. I could see them finishing in the middle tier. It's really just what you want to do as a first-year head coach is take a chance on a lot of high ceiling, low floor players. And just I'll elaborate on Gapare a little bit because I watched him a lot last year. I think he has the size, of course, to be a front court player, but he functions best as a wing kind of guy. He's also he has all the talent in the world, and you would see that every once in a while with him making these crazy plays, these step back threes or these crazy dunks or putbacks or whatever. He is just so raw, and the development of Gapare, who is a legitimate NBA prospect in my opinion, his development will really be a good litmus test on how good of a developmental coach Damon Stoudamire is. So that's a storyline I'm going to be looking out for. But that's our 5 teams here today. Like I said, we had 85 Georgia, 84 St. Louis, 83 LSU, 82 Vanderbilt, and 81 Georgia Tech. We will continue our countdown from 80 through 1 as we continue through the offseason to the start of the regular season here at CBB Review. Be sure to subscribe to our show here if you have not already, whether you have found us on YouTube, whether you have found us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, whatever. Be sure to subscribe. We're trying to get those numbers up. Appreciate everyone. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And take care.